Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're well. Looking forward to a long bank holiday. I'm Mel Johnson, or Mel One, as Mel prefers to call me, from the Sussex Social. So I am an email marketing and social media consultant. So I help businesses create and implement strategies that actually help them stand out without tearing their hair out. And I'm going to let Mel introduce herself. But the point of today's live is to just share some of the secrets of successful email marketing, not make it massively complicated, and just share some of the tips of how Mel and I achieve an average of an over 70% open rate for one of our clients and 104% on the email open sequence. But I will let her talk about that because I've absolutely no idea how she does it. So Mel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Mel 2, and together we are Mel Squared. We aren't actually Mel Squared, but one day maybe we'll start a little micro agency. I'm a creative copywriter and event speaker and almost podcast host. I've just been recording some episodes with Ben for the Indie Business Club podcast. You have to explain to me how an open rate can be 104%. I think it's something to do with bounce rate records or something. It doesn't make sense to me.
All it means is that somebody's opened that email multiple times. So what it will go, I just don't want to go too much into the data reporting right at the beginning, but what it will give you.
I do words, not maths, so
yeah, I know. What it will do in your email marketing system is it will give you an open rate percentage, so the number of people that have opened that email, but it'll also look at the number of times. And obviously that's calculated slightly differently depending on the software that you are using. I did forget to say, because I always forget to say this, that if you do have any questions or comments, if you're watching, do pop them in the chat. Mel and I will try not to get too distracted by them and answer them at the end or afterwards.
You mean me, don't you? You know
that I'm terrible. So I think one of the things I guess we wanted to start with is, and I still get asked this question, is email marketing old-fashioned? Because I think quite often with marketing, the things that are going on behind the scenes that not everybody sees is where the absolute gold is. But because it's not out there and big and flashy and all kind of in your face personal brandy, it sometimes gets seen as less glamorous and therefore not as good. And I mean, I think we were discussing this before we went live actually, but for those of you who were on LinkedIn yesterday, it had a mega meltdown. And I, at one point in the afternoon, couldn't access my profile, told me I couldn't access
crying in the corner.
And this happened to me a few years ago when I was a lot more active on Instagram, and my account got disabled, and luckily it came back.
What did you do?
It was just when it had that massive meta meltdown a couple of years ago.
You weren't naughty then?
No, I wasn't naughty. But I think one of the things to stress here is that if the people who opt into your email list, who want to be there, are they're really interested in you, or they wouldn't have bothered, because let's face it, most people are pretty wise to giving away their email address these days. But also that database is yours.
Yeah, you own that.
You are compliant. It's not just been scraped off LinkedIn. And if LinkedIn or whichever social media platform you're doing decides to disable your account for whatever reason, it can be quite difficult to get back. So it's really good to use your socials to nurture and grow that list.
Nikki Pilkington always says, don't build your sandcastles with someone else's sand. And I still put all my eggs in the LinkedIn basket quite often. So it's a good reminder to self as much as everyone else.
And I mean, I think that's a separate point, because I used to just purely specialize in helping people with their social media. And part of the reason I don't anymore is because, frankly, I'm probably better at email. But also, I think...
Have you aged out of the industry, Mel?
No, I haven't aged out of the industry. I still do a lot of training. But I think what I was realizing, there was people... If you've got a high value product or something that people are not sure whether they need to get to know, like, and trust you.
Yeah.
And social media is absolutely brilliant for that, but not everybody sees your posts because they're quite saturated. And it can feel, for a lot of people, there's a lot to do. there's a lot to get right, and it can feel quite stressful, and you're not really sure what your objectives are. So I think one of those objectives should be like, how do I get people to my website and get them onto my mailing list? And then, of course, if you're writing really good emails that are getting good engagement, you've got your social media content there, so it's all interconnected.
Yeah, and that's something that actually with our client that we've tried to do a bit more of is connecting that social with the email itself, because we started out using it a lot for, and this is where the sweet spot is. We've talked about this before, Mel, haven't we? About how small and medium businesses who have a story to tell, I think they're the ones that can benefit most, perhaps, from email marketing, because you're building this world, and or not building it, but letting people into it, and that is something that email can do really well. More so, I think, sometimes than social media, but it should definitely be part of the overall web of your approach. But I think the storytelling is such a cliche. Everyone's saying it, but though that's what people love to read, little interesting nuggets of information about the backstory. And my soapbox thing at the moment is we get told as marketers not to go on about ourselves all the time. But actually, that unless you do go on about yourself a little bit, people don't get to know who you are, whether that's you as a person, as a personal brand, or you as a bigger brand. I think you've got to let people in to your world a little bit. And we mentioned behind the scenes as being quite a valuable kind of method of getting people's interest and engagement, of showing how stuff happens, so they get to know the brand a bit better, which sounds very cheesy, but it's true.
It does sound really cheesy, but I think it's just so important that, you know, if you're whether you make cider or you are
to pluck an example completely out of the air,
or you are a legal practice, because a lot of the clients I work with are professional services, or you are a co-working space. The only difference between you and that business on the surface, which is what people can see until they get to know you, the only difference between you and David Williams, the accountant down the road, is the people within your organisation, and what goes on behind the scenes, and how you treat your clients. And I think, so when people are signing up to email, it's really important to remember that they're interested in you, or they wouldn't give you their email address. They have a choice about what their opinion of emails, and they have a choice about whether they unsubscribe. Yeah.
And on the note of unsubscribes, when you first, especially if you're a solopreneur, freelancer type, and you set up an email account and do a little newsletter, and then someone unsubscribes, it can feel devastating and like really no. But actually, it's great, because I put that in my own newsletter, Nosy Bastard News, that please unsubscribe, because I know how satisfying it is to have an inbox clear out. And it doesn't mean that they don't like you. And actually, there's a benefit to getting rid of and cleaning your list, isn't there, Mel, about your credibility. It's good to if you've got like 80% don't even open your email, then that can be something that counts against you.
Yeah, I think that there's two things there. I mean, I think one of the things around, I mean, I see people sending out regular emails from like their standard email account, which of course, if people have agreed to hear from you, is fine, but it does create some problems in terms of that there isn't really any branding, but also you can't actually capture the data and see what's going on. So, if you're using a email marketing system, it will rate your email list based on how engaged they are with the emails and the actions they're taking. So what that enables you to do, whether you've got 30 people on your list or 30,000, is segment them according to what they're interested in. So you're not trying to flog the same product to somebody who's already bought it and perhaps isn't going to buy it again, or doesn't need it again for 5 years. But also look at, I'll use MailChimp example. They give you a star rating. So your people that would maybe be 4 and 5 stars are really engaged with your email list. So that's a really good opportunity to actually reach out to them and, you know, and send them an email, give them a call, because I'm a bit of a fan of picking up the phone if you can find their phone number, because I know everybody says they're on the line. You know, but actually that and the emails that are getting the good open rate, that's the content that everybody's interested in. So what that's giving you by using a system like that and building your list is, over time, actually potentially a list of clients who if you reach out to them, they might be interested in working with you, even though they haven't responded, because most people don't respond, let's face it. So I think
even when you ask them a question, and that's why people do. And that is one of the reasons that people caught that engagement, and guilty as well.
One of the things I've started doing actually in email, which I hadn't done before, is actually is setting up like an auto link to an email. So it actually, if you've got a question or you've got some feedback, it actually like auto populates the email header. You can even auto populate the text, which is really lazy, maybe a bit AI for us, but you know, it's just encouraging people to respond in a really easy way, I think. So that's
when you're talking about like open rates as well, one thing, because we obviously write and sort out people's emails, but we also are the recipients of many emails. And one of the things that we've just talked about this previously, so I'm going to raise it now, that irritates you especially, is when people put your name in the subject, but other people respond really well to that. But it is open to abuse. If you've got an email grabber, what's the word, pop up on your website, and it asks for people's first name and they put poo head in or something, then like, or if there's a glitch and an error in some way or another, and it just has that classic your name, your first name in square brackets, it can set you up for failure, basically, is what I'm saying, if you have that hyper personalization. So would you steer your clients away from that? And just as a side note, with ours, we've got a different word, like we call them ciderlings, like an affectionate term that isn't. So we don't hyper personalize those.
No, I generally speaking, I do tend to have the name that they've put in
Dear Bumhead,
but I personally steer clear from putting it in the email title, so the email that drops in your inbox when it says, you know,
so you wouldn't have the subject.
A subject line. That's what I'm looking for. It is Friday.
You're the email expert.
The thing is, like, for me, and this could be a personal thing, and all of this is a case of test and measuring, because you absolutely have to like work out, you know, what's best for you, and that's right, and what your audience want, and that's right across your marketing. But if I get an email that's the subject is like, open this, Mel, I'm just like,
quick, Mel, hurry up, Mel.
And then, but I think also that's because when I go into open those emails, I know
it's never as urgent as they make out, is it?
Never as urgent as they make out, but also they tend to use your name so many times that it just becomes a bit repetitive.
Psychology thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So I would say, but it's, you know, it's definitely worth trying it, and because I think one of the things that the space that we operate in, and probably a lot of people watching this is that we work with other marketers. So we're a lot more savvy to these things than
you can't trick a tricker.
Exactly. I mean, my mum, she loves an email list. You know, she's like, oh, they sent me an email, because she doesn't really understand.
Oh, I love that.
But it may, you know, but I think that's also a benefit, because actually, if you've got your segmented list and you've got people who are really loyal or have bought lots of things to you before, you can just send that section of your audience a thing thanking them for their loyalty or an incentive or an offer.
So personalization and segmentation, but not necessarily with dear Bumhead. With that, just picking up on what you just said about marketers being wise to stuff, or like the audience, I think that might be something that stops a lot of freelancers and solo people from doing well. Firstly, I see it loads. People don't want to post on LinkedIn if they do words for a living. They're like, oh no, people will judge my words. Like, they won't. But with email as well, I wonder if that's something that makes people and like hover over the send button and then never actually do it, because they're so aware that their audience of fellow marketers or copywriters or whatever are wise to things like AIDA, the copywriting formula. They're like, oh no, everyone's going to see through the fact. They're going to know that I've used these tools and tactics.
But I think what we have to remember is they're tools and tactics to us because we're marketers, and you might not actually have an awful lot of other marketers on your list. So, it's that kind of thing of like that, there's no such thing of obvious. I mean, Ben has jokingly put in the comments.
I know, he's trying to distract me.
Which you're ignoring. But actually, I hope he doesn't mind, and he can put in the comments if he does. But Ben posted the other day about having a barrier to putting a newsletter out for all the reasons that we've just shared. And it's a really, it's a really common thing.
It's that feeling of like, why would anyone want to know this? And it's like you're so close to it, you can't see that actually to other people it's quite interesting.
And that everybody, and I think, and this runs kind of through the theme of doing your own marketing. Well, this stuff's really obvious, everybody knows it. Well, actually, it's not. And I mean, I sent out an email. If anyone wants to sign up to my list, I'll share at the end. A couple of weeks ago.
I don't know if I'm on your list, Mel.
A couple of weeks ago.
You have permission to add me on. You have permission.
Thank you. But it was like, and actually some of the advice had changed now because things moved, but it was like, are hashtags still should we still be using hashtags? Which is something I used to talk about all the time, but actually I don't anymore, because I kind of thought, and actually it was just coming up more and more. So I don't have quite a few people replied and said, this is really, really useful. Thank you so much for this, rather than just being kind of wishy-washy. But actually, as I was writing the email, I was thinking, this is so boring, nobody is going to want to read this. And actually it was the exact opposite. So you never know until you try.
And that's where you can show your knowledge of your industry and show that you're thought leader in your industry by getting ahead of news stories as well, or using a piece of news. I mean, I don't know how many emails have been written about the general election being called. I saw something actually the other day. Actually, no, I had one from Rightmove. I'm sure I had one from Rightmove. I'm going to find it while we're talking. So being really reactive to stuff like that in the news can be a good way to add value to your email list. It's Laura from Rightmove.
And I think that's really key, actually. And I think one of the skills is that as much as we don't think we might be used to speaking a certain language because you speak to other copywriters and there's ways you talk about things. I speak to other marketers. I have clients who work in incredibly difficult to navigate. The language is really difficult to navigate industries. I think if you can just make that as easy to understand for people as possible, that even from a professional perspective, that they're like, oh, I actually will go and speak to that person because I know they understand me and I don't feel like I'm asking questions that are really
there's no such thing as a stupid question
in a language that I don't understand. So I think there's some really good tips in there. But I think for me as well, it's we talk about one of the things that I see quite a lot, and I'm sure you do, Mel, as well, and probably a lot of us have it on a website, is a sign up to my newsletter button.
Yeah. And
people sign up to that and then they don't hear from you for months.
Stop, I feel attacked.
and then it's like, well, why have you got that button on your website? Well, because somebody told me that was a good thing to do. So it's like, if you are going to put that on there, you need to think about what the objectives are of that. I personally don't really like the term newsletter. LinkedIn makes me call me that when it's my newsletter, because I think people instantly think, it's going to take me ages to read and it's going to be really long. So I think if you have got that sign up on your website, it's being, and I'm not going to go down too far down the path of like lead magnets and so that, you do need to give people a reason to sign up. However, you need to understand what your objectives are around having that person sign up. Yeah, of course, it's the reality is, of course, it's because we all want more clients, but it might be because you want to build you need to build a bit bigger email list, or you're launching a new product, or you want to use it for market research. There's a whole range of different reasons, but it's actually thinking about how often, and this might be testing, you can actually, how often, what's your bandwidth, right?
So we only do 2 a month on ours, don't we? And we have kind of did a bit of a, to use the old phrase, suck it and see. We tried out a few things and then kind of fell into a bit of a pattern where one would end up being a kind of a shorter, more product-y, salesy one, and then the other would be pure storytelling, pure background about the business. And I think in that case they are looking, because of who they are as human beings, community is actually really important to them. So they're trying to bring, like I said earlier, about bringing you in and telling you stuff like the fact that Beardy's allergic to apples and bees. Like those little details that, like, it shortens the gap. I would say this shortens the gap between you as the brand and the customer. Ben has asked you a sensible question. Thank you, Ben, for not being silly. What you'd call a newsletter?
What would I call it instead of a newsletter? Oh, I think.
Would you go hyper, like, focused on what that brand is and does?
Yeah, I think
that as a.
I think I used to call it. Some people say, "Oh, my community," but you haven't really got a community. You're just sending out unless you have got.
That is a massive bugbear of mine, being called part of someone's community when I'm not. I've not opted in. However, if you have opted into an email, like, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, and if you're comfortable with that, but I think I used to call it community because I used to have Facebook group and all this kind of different stuff that I
an actual community.
But I think it's finding something that really is reflective of your brand, or even just saying, like, sign up to receive regular email updates, because that's what they are. Because I mean, like, for myself, I don't, and I think for our clients and Mel as well, you're not really sending out a newsletter in the same, so I think I think
so. The name, whatever the name is, has to manage people's expectations a bit. Then you think?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly it. And I think going back to just what we were saying around what's the purpose of that email. I think one of the really important things to think about when you're sort of developing that strategy is like, okay, and there's lots of different things you can do. We all get those really clever emails where we wanted to buy something, we've wandered off because the kids are shouting at us, or there's somebody at the door, or the dog's barking.
There's an amazing abandoned cart email I saw on LinkedIn from Liquid Death. Have you seen it?
No.
I'll find it and link to it in the comments after the show. Otherwise, I'll get distracted and do it. But having that, like, personalization of the brand and making it in the same tone of voice is really useful.
I mean, those kind of are like, product or membership or so. But I think the things around with those things is tactically, they're actually, if they need to be part of your marketing strategy, they're actually really easy to set up. But it's around, and some people do multiple ones. But I think with that, you need to really think about what people's buying patterns are and test that over time. So you sending out an abandoned cart email an hour later,
that's too needy. It's too needy.
It might be too needy, but also if you're selling, I don't know, if it's so if your kid, you're buying something in lockdown, we all bought stuff online, right? Didn't we? Because it's the immediate need of, like, my children are really bored. I'm trying to work. What can I get to entertain them? So but maybe this is just me. You just go
No.
get stuff. But I think if you're trying to book a holiday, say for example, for 12 people or even 4, you get to the checkout, you look at it, you look at the flight, and then you think, oh, actually, is there somewhere else I'd rather go? Or I need to go and check with my wife, my husband, whether they're, what time, and you wander off. And I think that's a bigger conversation. So that's perhaps where you would need.
But this is where it's an ethical thing, isn't it? Of like, if you're going to poke at people's urgency pain point, only do it if it's genuine. If there are genuinely 10 other people looking at that for those dates, that Airbnb for those dates, I want to know so that I know whether to, or like with eBay notifications, that's useful information. But if it's like, hurry now, it's a really limited amount, and there's 6,000 of them left when it's a product, that's just skeezy, dirty tactics. And actually, we have used the scarcity thing a little bit, but it's always genuine scarcity. Like when they're down. I think in the most recent newsletter we put, what do we class as low stock? We're not, obviously we're trying to sell you stuff naturally, but we're genuinely calling this low stock because this is how, when this tank empties, then we get to once it's at bottle stock and we've only got this many cases left, then it's officially reached low stock level. So we're like doing a bit of behind the scenes so that people know when we say there isn't much left, they don't go, oh yeah, right, they're just trying to sell us stuff. Like actually showing
last hour.
like, yeah. And I think that's the difference when you've built up trust with the customer or the recipient of your email, and then you go, just to let you know, we're low on this, or we've only got 10 tickets left, then they're not going to go, oh yeah, right. You would say that because you want to sell me stuff.
I think
that's where the consistency of your voice, tone of voice, and showing a little bit behind the scenes and a bit of yourself as a brand and your values and stuff. I think brand loyalty is it gets a bad rep because some people don't think it even exists at all. But again, with these smaller brands and smaller startups, I think there's so much opportunity to build rapport and goodwill with your customers in so many ways. And we've talked about talked about that at length, because we're lucky that our client also does in-person events, so they do literally get to meet their customers, and you got to go to one.
I did, because they only down the road to me. But yeah,
so building that trust means that then when you do use the scarcity pain point and scarcity marketing, it's not a sleazy tactic, it's just like genuinely being helpful. And that's what we're trying to do at all points, is be helpful.
I think that's it. And I think as well, it's the concern around sending out a regular email that is that it's not going to be regular. And actually, when you're thinking about what's my email strategy going to be, of course, first of all, it feeds into the things that you've just said, Mel. So it's actually what are my objectives with this? Like, it should be everything. How often am I going to do it? And if you're quite new, you might not necessarily know, but having a good understanding of your sales cycle can actually be really important, because that can give you an indicator of how often to send things out. And then, using really basic segmentation. So if you've got a list of existing clients who've bought, in my case, it might be that they've been on a training course with me, like they're on a separate list. So
they're well warmed up.
I can either use that list to upsell to them at a later date or to get back into touch. So there's lots of different things, but I think we don't kind of want to overcomplicate it. But I think one of the really, and I think one of the really key things that you can have when you're starting out with email marketing is setting up what we call like a welcome sequence or a nurture sequence, which is essentially a series of automated emails that go out at different periods of time after that person has signed up to like kind of warm them up. so to
It's
speak. So
worth
they get to know you a
mentioning
bit better.
we've done a seasonal one. So as change, because of the fact that making cider is such a seasonal business and there are different things happening throughout the year, we've got the spring one, the summer one, and there's just a little section in it that's adjusted to reflect where they are in their year, because to them the seasons and everything are so relevant.
Yeah.
So it's worth thinking about whether that's going to be the case for your clients when you're working with them.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity to, because obviously everyone will only see one lot of welcome sequence, but are there changes in the business that are worth having several that you then switch over to on the 1st of May or whatever? It's just another way to personalize it.
And I mean, over time, you know, if you've got different entry points into your to your email database, you may have different sequences for different people, and you know, you can have ones that you set up later, which, you know, if you know, for example, that if Mel knows that she does a piece of she rewrites someone's website copy and they're not going to come back for 2 years, for example, I don't know what the would
you need to rewrite a website every 6 months, honest.
Would that, well, yeah, of course. Well, that's just me, because I'm always like, well, should I do this or should I do this? But you could almost set up that automation to you know, keep that client warm by sending them an email every quarter or something. Again, it sort of depends on lots of different factors in your sales cycle. But actually, once you need to get back in touch with them, that's kind of automated, but in a nice kind of personalized way, which as a business owner, it does take time to get to that point, but it's a massive game changer because you haven't got to worry about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a mini CRM.
It's set up, you don't have to think about it. Ben has very helpfully just WhatsApped me the Liquid Death one. So Liquid Death had this as the I think it's an abandoned cart. So if for people who don't know, an abandoned cart email is, you know, when you put something in your shopping basket and then you, like Mel said, get distracted and don't buy it. Then it's the little nudge. And Liquid Death have done one where the subject line is, maybe you died. It says, we're worried about you. Hey, it's me, the guy who writes all these emails from Liquid Death. Listen, I don't like to break character like this, but did you die or get kidnapped or something? Seems like you were about to finish checking out on the site and you just suddenly stopped. And then it's like, hope everything's cool, blah, blah, blah. So that is a great example. Thank you, Ben. What a hero, of where you can hyper lean in, like just lean in hard if you've built up a really strong tone of voice and a really strong branding. Then that is one of those opportunities to.
But I mean, that's interesting. That's really interesting, actually, because in the context of the brand, that's perfect. They've absolutely nailed it. However, like it's not going to be appropriate for kind of everybody.
No. Please do not put, have you died if you're selling like cushion covers or something.
I think it's absolutely like everything is, it's laying that foundation. So it's like, okay, what's the purpose of all these emails?
And on that, can I just lead, just as another side note, we know really well who is reading the emails that we do. So we know that if we put in references that will be relevant to a certain generation, they're going to lap it up and love it. So as with all marketing, knowing who your audience is, and Liquid Death obviously know very, very well who they're speaking to, that can, well, it does make a huge difference. So one of the things that we also, for the protection of the brand, we've talked about is not becoming the DFS of cider makers, where everyone's just waiting for a discount code, because you just always, you know, every bank holiday there'll be 15% off or something. So often people will sign up because of a discount code, but if you then send them another discount code within a few weeks of them signing up, you just kind of risk cheapening the brand and cheapening the value and making it so that people will only do it. And you like a discount code sometimes, don't you? But I think you got to be careful.
Yes.
So that's kind of a word of warning on the discounts.
Yeah, I think there's that, and I think that's also really interesting and I think particularly within the like professional services sector, people struggle to develop that incentive to sign up on their website, because actually
there is no incentive.
That's a little bit harsh, but but the point is that's about knowing your audience, because there is to their audience. So, but you can't discount off something that doesn't actually have a price on your website, because nobody knows if that discount is real. So it's not quantifiable. So it's actually about identifying the things that what's interesting to people and is going to make them sign up. So, and that can be related to it. It's probably related to the thing that you get asked all the time.
Yeah.
And I think, but also that can help kind of inform that welcome sequence, because you can then set up a series of emails that help people with that main.
Yeah, and knowing what the barriers might be or the hurdles that are stopping them from signing up, and answering and addressing and like reassuring them on those within the welcome sequence is, you're getting way ahead of where you need to be. So it's comes down to knowing your customer and knowing, to use the example that we're both working on, knowing that the people aren't choosing you because you're cheap. So therefore, they're not there for the discount. They're there because they believe in the product. And so we try and weave that in the copy about what makes it stand out. The fact that I didn't know that. I've learned so much about apples. I didn't know that traditional cider is literally just squished apples, and that all of the yeast that's needed to ferment them is already there. They don't add anything at all. I didn't know that. That's cool.
No.
So those little facts and little details about the sex lives of apple trees as well.
Which
I didn't know that.
We had to change in the.
We couldn't say sex lives.
It was going to get jumped by the email filters. So there are some sort of algorithms at bay, and actually I think that's one of the things
worth noting.
But one of the things you've got to remember is that it's so easy for people to find an email, because most people don't delete them straight away, and they're really easy to search for. So it's a good way of being front of mind, even if people don't open them. And I think going back to having that kind of automated sequence, if you've got that spread over a short, I wouldn't advise for most people to send out like 5 emails in a week and then not send anything out at all. But if you realistically know, and as your strategy, you're like, realistically, I can't do my regular email is only going to be once every 6 weeks.
Yeah, and then you're like, boom, 6 in one day on the welcome sequence.
I think think about, okay, well, if this person's going to sign up and they're not going to hear from me for 6 weeks, and obviously that's not going to happen for everybody, can I set up, and because these emails don't have to be very long, these welcome ones. No. Can I set up something so they will receive something once a week, once a fortnight, that reminds them why they signed up, but kind of takes the pressure off or onus of me to feel like I've got to be writing that email fortnightly, weekly, whatever it might be. So I think that's really effective for your customer to build that relationship with them and get that know, like, and trust going. But it can also be a bit of a relief for you, because it's not suddenly the thing you get to the end of the day and you go, oh my God, I haven't done my newsletter this week, or
that's where having and to pick on Ben again, because he has said about his newsletter side of things. One of the things people seem to think, and it's the same with LinkedIn. I know I always wang on about LinkedIn, but people feel like they have to write loads. And actually, some of the best emails I get, Molly Scanlon does a really short newsletter. It's just a few lines. I can't remember the name of it, but there was another newsletter I'd heard about that I haven't actually signed up to yet. Literally 1 sentence. It'll just be 1 sentence. And I'd love to write that one. That sounds fun. It doesn't have to be War and Peace, and it shouldn't be.
I think
But
Yeah.
the best thing you can hear is, "Oh, I read it all to the end." Oh,
That one sentence is going to take you all day.
that is true. Yeah.
But also, I think I think so. Another client I work with, he says, I just do kind of them border marketing for them, and Paul, the MD, I'm like, we need newsletter. He's like, I don't like newsletters. No one's going to want to read it. No one's going to want to sign up. I've never signed up to anything. He's lovely. I've never signed up to anything in my 25 years of being an MD. So we was, I don't know, we send the first email out to like 140 people or whatever. He's phoned me up. This is amazing. People left me a voice.
Converted.
We've got all these inquiries, and I'm just like, I think
told you so.
But that's the barrier in their head.
Yeah.
Because actually they don't know what to say about their business. So I think it's a lot of it is that kind of test and measure, and also remembering that you send an email out, you can see what people are opening, what they're clicking through on, but they're not necessarily going to respond.
Click-through rates are tiny, and that's, I think, if you start your own newsletter, you should go and look at some stats, because it will make you feel better. It's like 1%, or I think I looked this up actually because I was organized for once, and the highest open rate by industry that I found anyway in this particular article said faith-based. Obviously they're already invested in that, and the click-through on those industry emails it's only 2.5%, even when it's like one of the most relevant and trusted sources of email. But the click-through rates in general seem to be like 0.7 to 2%.
I think that's important to bear in mind. I think also,
shouldn't be the end goal. It should be part of the wider marketing, rather than just like, let's get people to buy stuff from this email immediately. It's about those little incremental trust, like you said, trust building.
And I think also for the most part as well is that, as a general rule, if you've got a smaller list, you possibly your audience are more likely to be engaged, just because you haven't got the volume. So what you'll tend to see is that if you say you had 200 people on your list and suddenly you had 200,000, your engagement rates might look very different. But also I think that, I think not worrying about the size, it's the quality of the people on there, not just the size, because actually most of us don't need an infinite number of clients.
And I think it's worth noting as well, people tend to check their email while they're doing something else. Like people don't always sit at the computer reading through an email. So having a non-spammy but catchy subject line is really useful. I mean, I'm saying that, and also having to admit that mine is nosy bastard news number whatever, so I use the subline for like the sneak peek of what's inside, because I was just lazy in doing it. Do as I say, not as I do. But I think our biggest open rate was like, I can't remember the wording, but it was basically hinting that there was like a secret about Beardy, which was the allergy thing. So I think if you can use some storytelling tactics without it being a sleazy way of doing it, then that just draws people in, makes them want to keep reading and find out what you're going to say next. Are we going to get kicked out bang on 45 minutes?
I don't know. Left. Sometimes it cuts off. I don't know if anyone watching has got any questions, but we can also come back and answer.
We'll be on LinkedIn today. I mean, let's be honest. I will be on LinkedIn the rest of the day.
But I think just to kind of summarize the key points is just, is think about what that objective is around that. Incorporate some storytelling. I think also perhaps don't forget to tell people that actually you are trying to, you do want them to buy something as well, and you have got availability, because I think that's quite often the thing that we all miss in our own marketing, particularly if you're quite.
No, I'm super busy. But then also actually, please buy my stuff.
Yes, please buy my stuff. Please buy our stuff.
Buy our stuff.
And but just thinking about what are those different things, and I think obviously there's lots of different things you can do, and what I tend to do when I work with clients is kind of map out this kind of visual thing of what it looks like and where you would take people
You're
out.
so good at that stuff. You're so good at the strategy.
But I think the key things is just, I think is keeping it simple. How often can you send that? What needs to be in there? And I think, but I do think going back to that initial welcome sequence can kind of really help you.
Yeah.
And actually, it might seem time consuming to have that thing that makes people download, but it might, and write those emails. But actually, those emails are going to give you a lot.
Yeah, because we did a really long sequence. Like, there's a lot of work that went into that, but then it's done and it's there. Yeah. It's there waiting for whoever.
Yeah.
Cool. But okay. my most important thing, I think, would be knowing the readership, because that then informs everything else. As with all copywriting, is knowing who you're speaking to. Yeah. Just makes everything flow a lot easier.
Well, I think that, I think that's just the kind of key. And I know everybody, there's a lot of like, oh, I don't like client avatars. We shouldn't bang on about ideal client. But actually, the reality is that stuff's important. But what's not important is, in most parts is kind of where they shop, what car they drive. Actually, it's more about their values and what do they actually care about.
And that shared nostalgia and values. Like, I think that's, especially if you're marketing to a certain age range, that there's a lot you can talk about without needing to know whether they use an Apple computer or an iPhone. And if you can't do it yourself, just get Mel Squared in. I keep joking about it. One day
one day
we'll actually be Mel Squared.
Talk about it. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for everybody who's watching. Like, as I said, any questions, do just pop them in the chat or the comments. We'll come back and answer them, or message us directly
on our page, Mel Squared. We don't have a page.
Just giving yourself more and more work to do. Or me. But thank you for joining me, Mel, and we will have a great. Oh, and everybody have a fantastic bank holiday weekend.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Cool, no worries.
Now you have to end it because I don't know how.